everyone, my name is Melanie Vairawanathan. I'm the founder of Melmark Law, a Melbourne-based family law firm. But before any of that, I was just a Sri Lankan girl who moved to Australia as a teenager with a suitcase, a law degree dream, and absolutely no idea how hard the journey ahead would be. A lot of my life has been about rebuilding, learning to adapt, finding strength in moments that could have very easily broken me. Somewhere along the way, survival turned into purpose. And this chapter is really a reflection of that journey between two worlds, between who I was and who I've become. I'm really honored to share it with you. Between two worlds, Melanie Vairawanathan. I arrived in Australia at 17 with two suitcases, a carefully folded stack of academic transcripts, and a determination that ran deeper than I realized at the time. I still remember standing in the airport terminal, hearing unfamiliar accents, feeling the weight of possibility and uncertainty sit side by side in my chest. At 17, I called it bravery. With distance, I understand that courage and fear often coexist. What I was really carrying was the awareness that everything familiar had shifted beneath my feet. Migration does not simply relocate you, it reconstructs you. You become conscious of yourself in ways you never were before. The cadence of your accent, the cultural references that pass over your head, the recalibration required in every new room. You learn to observe before you participate, to listen before you speak, and to read a room before you decide how much of yourself to bring into it. You work harder than you thought possible, not because you're ambitious, but because you feel an unspoken responsibility to justify the opportunity in front of you. In those early years, I began to understand that the way I moved through the world had already been shaped long before I arrived in Australia. I grew up in Kandy, Sri Lanka, in a home that was full in every sense of the word, full of people, full of noise, full of culture and connection. There was always someone around, cousins running through the house, aunties in the kitchen, grandparents nearby. It was a life where you were never alone and where identity was something shared, not individually constructed. But alongside that warmth, there were expectations, particularly for women. On my mother's side of the family, life was far more traditional. My mother was an exceptionally intelligent woman. As a student, she ranked among the top candidates for a prestigious national academic award and was accepted to study law at university. But at that time, expectations for women were different. She did not have the freedom to pursue a professional career and instead followed the path expected of her, prioritizing marriage and family. On my father's side, I saw something completely different. My grandmother was bold, outspoken, and ambitious, well ahead of her time. She spoke her mind, pursued opportunities, and refused to shrink herself to fit expectations. Between those two influences, I came to understand both the limitations placed on women and the possibilities that existed beyond them. That contrast shaped me early. It made me question things. It made me push. It made me unwilling to simply accept what was handed to me without asking whether it was right. Despite the constraints she experienced, my mother was unwavering in her support of me. In many ways, she was quietly rebellious. She encouraged me to think independently, to speak up, and to pursue opportunities she had never been given. Her message was simple but unwavering. Build a life of your own, be independent, and above all, be financially secure. At that time, I understood it as advice. With distance, I recognized it for what it was: protection expressed in the only way she knew how. That belief shaped everything that followed. I completed my London GCE examinations and was later awarded an international scholarship for excellence to study law at Monash University. It was an extraordinary opportunity, but even with the scholarship, studying overseas remained financially out of reach for my family. At that point, my uncle stepped in and covered the remaining balance of my tuition. He believed in me long before I understood what I was capable of. His belief changed the trajectory of my life. It also came with a quiet pressure, not imposed but deeply felt, to make it count, because I understood that I was stepping into spaces where I would be seen before I was heard. Like many international students, those years were not polished. I worked multiple jobs, retail during the day, market research at night, anything I could find. I took on unpaid internships at law firms simply to get a foot in the door. I was studying full time, working odd hours, and trying to build a future in a country that still felt unfamiliar. There were moments of exhaustion, moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether I could sustain it all. But underneath all of that, something else was forming. A quiet, steady resilience that did not need to be announced. It simply showed up day after day in the decision to keep going. If I'm honest, my decision to pursue law did not begin with a university offer. It began much earlier. Even as a child, I was opinionated and constantly asking why. I had a strong sense of fairness and an instinct to speak up when something did not feel right. I was drawn to the idea that you could be strong without having to change who you are, that you could take up space, use your voice, and still remain entirely yourself. Law to me became a way to give structure to that idea, to create security not just for myself, but for others navigating uncertainty. As I entered the profession, I began to notice subtle expectations. Ambition in men was assumed, in women it was assessed. Confidence was welcomed, but only within invisible boundaries. Rather than shrinking, I learned to sharpen. Preparation became my comfort. If I was going to sit at the table, I would know the material thoroughly. I did not want to rely on personality or presence. Excellence became my equalizer. But long before I stepped into a courtroom, life had already begun preparing me for the kind of work I would one day do there. In my early years, I found myself in an abusive relationship. I was far from home, without the support systems I had grown up with, navigating circumstances that felt difficult to untangle. Abuse rarely begins dramatically. It unfolds gradually. Isolation presents itself as protection. Control disguises itself as care. Criticism slips in quietly, framed as guidance. Leaving that relationship was not one grand act of courage. It was a series of quiet awakenings, moments where something within me shifted until I could no longer ignore what I deserved. When that clarity came, I chose myself, fully and without apology. That experience stays with you, not just the events themselves, but the fear, the isolation, and the silence that surrounds it. It did not harden me, it made me more perceptive. It taught me something I carry into my work every day. Strength is not immunity. Intelligence does not shield you from manipulation. Even capable, ambitious women can find themselves in dynamics that slowly diminish their sense of self, and often they do not recognize it until they're already deep within it. Years later, when a client hesitates before describing her partner's behavior, I recognize that pause. I understand the complexity of leaving and the weight of staying. I know that strength is not always loud, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply decide that enough is enough. Over time, I have come to understand that reinvention is possible. What once feels inevitable does not have to define the rest of your life. Migration adds another layer to that reinvention. Living between countries makes identity fluid. Part of you remains anchored in the place that shaped you, while another adapts to the life you're building. I built my career and my family in Australia, creating a life that once felt far beyond reach. Yet a part of me remains deeply rooted in Sri Lanka. My son Malachi is growing up in a very different reality. Much of his connection to that world happens through a phone screen. He waves to his grandparents across time zones, learning the voices and faces of family members who live thousands of kilometers away. That distance became particularly real while I was pregnant with him. My uncle, the same uncle who believed in me enough to support my education and make my move to Australia possible, passed away unexpectedly. And there's something about not being able to say goodbye in person that does not quite settle. It stays with you. That is one of the quiet griefs of migration. Life's most important moments often unfold far away from the people who shaped you. You learn to carry both love and loss across distance without the closure that presence can bring. You keep moving, but a part of you is always catching up. Motherhood did not arrive neatly into my life. Malachi was born at a time when my business was still finding its feet. There was no pause, no structured leave, just a constant balancing of both worlds. I remember drafting affidavits with him beside me, answering client calls between feeds, and learning very quickly that strength as a mother looks different to anything I had experienced before. It was not polished, it was not perfect, but it was real. That season of life changed me. It made me more focused, more intentional, and more grounded in what actually matters. It also forced a realization I had once resisted. There is a tension many professional women navigate, the intersection between ambition and family. For a very long time, I did not believe in it. When I first read Indra Nooyi's words that the career clock and the biological clock are in conflict, I dismissed it. It felt like a limitation, not a reality. I thought with enough discipline and planning, I could build my life in whatever sequence I chose, until I found myself exactly where I had intended to be and realized something I had once rejected. The conflict is real, not because women are incapable, but because many professional structures were never designed with women's lives in mind. As a first-generation immigrant without an extended support system, I understood that sustaining both high performance and family life within those structures would require more than endurance. It would require redesign. From the outside, my corporate role appeared stable. In reality, the culture had eroded, leadership was unpredictable, and I found myself carrying more than I should have. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Resilience should not require tolerating dysfunction. If the environment does not support the standard you want to uphold, you build a new one. And so I founded my own family law firm, Melmark Law. It was a deliberate decision to build a workplace where excellence did not come at the cost of burnout, where young female lawyers did not have to overextend themselves to compensate for instability above them, where strength was modeled, not demanded, and where ambition and well-being could coexist. We may be boutique in size, but impact is not measured in scale. It is measured in families stabilized, in women empowered, and in the quiet relief that settles across a client's face when uncertainty begins to lift. To make that model sustainable, I had to think differently. The pandemic made one thing clear. Work does not need to be tied to a physical office. Flexibility is not a compromise, it's an advantage. That thinking led to the creation of the Virtual Office, a Sri Lankan-based legal support business working with law firms and professional services across Australia and globally. At its core, it provided paralegal and administrative support. But for me, it was never about just outsourcing. It was about building a more efficient and sustainable way of working. It allowed me to scale without the overheads that often drive legal costs up, and importantly, to pass those efficiencies on to clients. Because I have always believed this. Families should not be left to navigate some of the hardest moments of their lives without proper legal support simply because they cannot afford it. At the same time, the virtual office created meaningful opportunities for women in Sri Lanka. Highly capable, highly educated women who simply needed access to the right platforms. Creating that pathway while strengthening my own business felt aligned with both where I came from and what I stand for. It reinforced a belief I now carry into everything I build. With a structure, if a structure does not work, you do not accept it, you redesign it. That same thinking underpins Melmark Law. It's not just a business, it's a different way of working. Today, the majority of our team is female. We're proudly multicultural and intentionally so. Two businesses, two intersecting worlds, one intention: to build systems where women do not have to choose. They connect the two places I call home: Sri Lanka, where resilience was part of everyday life, and Australia, where I've rebuilt and redefined myself. Bringing those worlds together has allowed me to build something that reflects both. I no longer feel divided between them. But the work doesn't stop there. I came to understand that change requires more than legislation. It requires visibility, leadership, and women who are willing to step forward and shape the conversation. Supporting women and families cannot begin and end within a legal file. It has to go further. My work extends beyond the courtroom. As a business owner, speaker, and media voice, I advocate for women and families navigating some of the most complex moments of their lives. I'm also a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Those roles do not sit outside my work. They are the reason for it. Through that work, I have seen a consistent pattern. Women are often placed in circumstances that were never designed for them. Yet they rise, rebuild, and keep going, often without recognition. Resilience is everywhere. What matters is what you choose to build from it. If I could return to the 17-year-old girl stepping off that plane, I would not promise her ease. I would promise her growth. I would tell her that the moments that feel uncertain, uncomfortable, and unfair will shape her more than anything that comes easily. What feels like a setback will become the foundation of her authority. The world does not change through perfection. It changes when women decide they're no longer willing to stay where they were placed. When that moment comes, will you stay or will you rebuild anyway?